Hello everyone, my name is Lance, host of the Managing Morgellons Lance YouTube channel and Facebook page. Today I just wanted to make an awareness video on Morgellons disease. First, I'd like to begin with reading out the vision and mission related to Morgellons disease. This has been inspired by who I consider to be one of the top Morgellons disease advocates worldwide. And the first thing she says about this mission and vision is that it doesn't belong to her, that it belongs to every Morgellons disease patient. And I truly believe that, and I believe the sincerity of Brittany. Here we go. I am telling the world about Morgellons disease and creating a safe space for others to come forward and to share their stories. I am standing up for the human rights of all Morgellons disease patients by validating, respecting, and spreading awareness about the reality of living with Morgellons disease. I am supporting other Morgellons disease advocacy projects by associating, promoting, and engaging. The vision is to end controversy surrounding Morgellons disease by compelling the CDC to conduct a legitimate study and to validate this infectious disease. We seek a public apology by those in charge of handling the corrupt CDC Morgellons disease study done in 2012. All major news outlets must do a story when this happens. All Morgellons disease patients can seek effective treatment without fear of misdiagnosis, gaslighting, or rejection. Every Morgellons disease patient has their own story. Their lives have been destroyed, fallen apart, and completely you're hit up against the most tremendous suffering and institutional discrimination. Doctors don't know how to deal with Morgellons disease, and those who do take their orders from the CDC in large part. The CDC conducted a study in 2012 where they determined, after an extensive study that they carried out over the course of 4 years, where the conclusion was that all Morgellons disease patients worldwide ought to be considered as psychiatric patients with a severe delusional disorder called delusions of parasitosis. What they are saying is, anybody with Morgellons disease symptoms who comes into the doctor's office or the hospital, there's nothing wrong with them, and that they've just got serious mental problems. They believe they have parasites moving throughout their skin. They believe they have fibers growing throughout their skin. They self-mutilate. They pick at their skin obsessively and create their own skin lesions and sores, and then those sores get infected, and that these people are so mentally deranged that they should be drugged with strong antipsychotic pharmaceutical medication. It's completely unconscionable, and those who are advocating for Morgellons disease want to bring a stop to this. Now I'd like to provide a little bit of background on my situation. How did I get Morgellons disease? What was my life like before this? Well, back in 2009, in August, I was employed by a contractor for the British Columbia, Canada outdoor recreation site. This was an outdoor natural hot springs, a beautiful place, a paradise on earth as far as I was concerned. There was a hiking trail and there was a campsite, and every day I'd be living outdoors, working outdoors, meeting incredible people who came to use the hot springs, just having the time of my life, while at the same time being very proud of the role I had in society. I was happy with all things, with a few exceptions, and one of those being bugs. It was an inescapable part of the job, and it's just something you had to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Well, I got a tick bite on the job. Then I started to get symptoms of ill health. The most bizarre and unusual symptom had to do with my fingertips. I thought because of the manual labor that I was doing that I was developing calluses over my fingertips. I didn't understand why the skin was thickening and why I would get this dull, ever-present, ongoing pain. It was so concerning that I would take out my multi-tool, I would open up the part where you have the metal file on it, and I would actually file down the tips of my fingers and my thumbs, just to remove the excess growth of skin that was going on my fingertips. And I did get some relief from that. But lo and behold, the very following day or 2 days later, I'd have to file them all over again, just in the same way you would file your fingernails. I had to do this to my own fingertips. I had no idea that was associated to a bacterial infection that I got from the tick bite. I had no idea. Unfortunately, 2 weeks later, while working that same job, I was struck by an SUV in a head-on motor vehicle collision, and I was driven on top of. I was unconscious, and I woke up to the sound of crunching, twisting metal, which was the sound of the SUV reversing off my body. Screaming in pain for approximately 4 hours, I had to wait for the paramedics to arrive. And suddenly the last thing on my mind was the tick bite, or the infection, or the skin growth on my fingertips. Day after day, week after week, month after month, the symptoms continued to get worse. This escalated over the course of 1 year and 2 years to the point where every single day I could no longer go on living. I would report these symptoms to my doctor, and he would do his best to try and accommodate the symptoms I was dealing with. We explored many different diagnoses, and nothing at all made any significant difference. And then I started to sneak around and go to other doctors and try to ask them, hey, what's going on here? Can you help me? These are my symptoms. And they would try to help me, and they couldn't do anything either. Day after day, I would do internet research, trying to figure out what these symptoms were and what was wrong with me. All the while, I had extreme stress going on in the background, and maybe some other day I can talk about that. Where this led me to was to the brink of suicide on a day-to-day basis, over and over again, and nobody understanding the kind of hell I was going through. This is what Morgellons disease patients are dealing with. Nobody understands, and nobody's heard of this disease. And if they have heard of it, well, they've heard what the CDC has said about it, which is these people are crazy, they're just obsessed with their own physical symptoms, they want attention. It's terrible what they've said about Morgellons disease patients. Well, it's been 12 years for me. I have a pretty good understanding of what Morgellons disease patients are going through, and that's why I'm doing these advocacy videos and efforts. So finally, after approximately 2 years of suffering with Morgellons disease, I finally came across the Oklahoma State University Center for the Investigation of Morgellons Disease. I called them, and the first thing I asked was, is this disease a real disease? Is this really what I have? Is this true? I have all these symptoms. I've never heard of this disease. What's going on here? They said, yes, it's true. Morgellons disease does exist. It really is a disease. So I said, how can you help me? And they said, well, we're just a university. We are studying this right now. There's a lot more we have to understand about this disease. In the meantime, What we can tell you is continue to visit our website for updates, which you can see right now if you search Oklahoma State University Morgellons. Just type in those terms into Google and you will be able to see that in all reality, Morgellons disease exists. It's a true physical disease causing enormous human suffering. So what did I do? I went to the website for the Charles E. Holman Morgellons Disease Foundation, and what did I find? Extraordinary volunteers. I called them on the phone, and they spent a considerable amount of time with me. I was in great distress, and I had many questions, seeking many answers. Again, I got further confirmation that this disease truly does exist, and I sought help for it. They gave me recommendations on things that other Morgellons disease patients were doing to help resolve their symptoms, and one by one, I discovered that most of those things didn't help me, and I continued to struggle. I sought healing through homeopathy, naturopathy. I even went to church healing groups. I participated in sacred ceremonies with First Nations peoples groups. I covered a lot of ground, and I spent all the money I had. I borrowed money and spent all that money. I purchased anything that I could get my hands on in order to try to help me with the symptoms. Keeping in mind, I got this disease in 2009. The CDC study on Morgellons disease hadn't even been released by that point when I was going through my first 3 years from 2009 until 2012 when the CDC study came out. Of which the first 2 years I didn't even know I had Morgellons disease. And by the way, I went for help through psychologists, through counselors, through victim assistance advisors and services. I wrote letters, and many of them, to many community leaders. No one could help me. And it wasn't for lack of trying. So when the CDC study came out in 2012, this was the most devastating blow to myself and to all Morgellons disease patients. So now I'm going to really jump ahead because I don't want this video to go on forever. I'm hoping that people will see this and be inspired and want to do something about this, want to raise their voices, and want to change the world as far as Morgellons disease goes. It's completely wrong what's going on right now. So I'll fast forward up until the year 2019. In 2019, I took the time to write a letter to the Minister of Health of Canada, calling for action, desperately calling for action, pointing out that this was a true disease, and saying that we desperately need help. And then, on that same day, at the end of the day, I sent a second letter, desperately requesting support and letting the government know that the trust has been completely broken between the Morgellons disease patient population and the government, the very people who are the representatives of the people. And the Minister of Health of Canada and her administration just ignored those letters. So, 2 years later, I'm taking much stronger action. First of all, I'm aligning myself with others who have Morgellons disease. And I'm finding other advocates who share the same attitudes and opinions with me. Before I get into the present though, I just want to share a little something that's a really big something.